We're not talking about just outbuildings or even outhouses. We're talking about ADUs. This is The Real Story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
And I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is where two broker associates with 40 years of experience talk about all things real estate. Hey, Sherry,
Hey, Adam.
are you enjoying the beginning of spring market?
Absolutely. And so are my allergies.
Oh gosh, yeah. Everything is in bloom, which we love for photos, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Great time to sell a house because everything looks beautiful. So
yeah.
the agents might not look that great, but
I had to go get a Kleenex box for the car today as I was driving around on broker's tour. So,
yeah, the
oh,
price we pay.
yeah, I love living in California. This is, there's people still digging out of snow, and here we are the first week of March, and yeah, let's go to the beach.
Well, it's funny because our office manager is from Michigan and her family was visiting yesterday and they all came into the office to kind of check out where she works and meet her coworkers and they all had shorts on. It was like 67 degrees.
Yeah,
But I guess for Michigan people, that seems like shorts weather.
yeah. And they were saying it was a little bit brutal of a winter there. So,
Yeah, 27 days out of 31, they had snow. It's like, no, thank you. I'll pass.
this is probably the third week in a row we've talked about how great our California weather is. And I think we're going to lose all of our listenership in the Midwest.
Yeah, people are probably tired of it, or they want to move here.
Well, let's work on that.
We're
Yeah.
soliciting clients, so
Well, actually, that kind of helps dovetail into our topic for today. So,
yeah,
housing shortage is a big problem in California,
yes.
and one of the ways that the state is trying to increase housing inventory is by allowing people to build ADUs with less red tape. And so, we are bringing in an expert today. We'd like to introduce Gwen Bertolami. Did I say that correctly?
Oh, absolutely.
License. Yeah, Gwen is was almost a client. That's actually not a right word, but she and her husband almost wrote on a listing that we had. But she's actually friends with a coworker of ours, which is how we met. And Gwen is a structural engineer. She's got a license, professional engineering license, and she is a builder. So, Gwen, welcome to The Real Story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Um, I am really kind of fascinated a little bit about your story about how you got into construction because it doesn't seem like it was a linear path. So, um, we were discussing just before we got on camera that Gwen and I both went to Cal Poly, and you majored in mechanical engineering. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And then I had a sort of a corporate career with Hewlett Packard and Apple Computer, working on computers.
Mm.
And then was at home with my kids and just needed to do something other than change diapers.
Yep.
And so I started doing house drawings. I knew CAD and started working with a gentleman who was a foreman builder. So he was really showing me about construction and was actually under construction with my kids for 4 years. And
Yikes.
so saw and managed a lot of that construction myself. And then started doing house drawings and basically trivializing a little bit, but I went and got my civil engineering credentials. So that was not an easy task to get. The state of California, because of our seismic requirements, is one of the most difficult states in the United States to get a civil engineering stamp. So I mainly do structural engineering, and then we started doing and started an ADU business, Comfort Casitas, because we've been doing them before it was something that the state was pushing. We had done a number of them, but wanted to expand it and promote that side of our business. So here we are.
That sounds great. So let's talk about kind of the mindset of somebody who wants to do an ADU. And I imagine there's a big variety of options that they might have. So sometimes it's somebody who might just want extra space. Sometimes they want a separate dwelling unit for family guests or parents or in-laws, or maybe in a rental unit. Sometimes I think people just want it as an office or something else. So when what is your experience when people approach you about adding an ADU? What do you find people looking for?
I think we see a lot of clients that are looking actually to do an ADU, but we find the ones that end up pulling the trigger on actually getting it done is where they're looking at a combination of needs that they want met. For example, we had one where the client wanted to create a studio space for their adult son to have his business, but the idea was that we created this flex space so that in the future, if we added a wall in a certain location that we identified for them, then all of a sudden the parents could live there in the future, and it would be comfortable for them. So we see a lot of situations where you want the ADU for your aging parent or adult child, but you also want to potentially have revenue in the future, should that situation change. So it's that where they're looking for the combination of uses where it really seems like people want to move forward and pull the trigger on creating the space.
But so that makes sense to me. So not necessarily a singular focus, maybe that's sometimes enough, but when it has multiple possibilities, then it makes more
Correct.
sense. Yeah. There's some nomenclature around ADUs that might be helpful to clarify. I've heard the term junior ADU. What is it? Does it have to have a bathroom and a kitchen to be a regular ADU? Maybe you could help us with some definitions because I think that sometimes anybody thinks just a outbuilding with electricity counts. So
Correct.
how would you describe some of those different scenarios?
So a pure ADU is separate from the main residence. It can still be attached to be an ADU, but it has a clear, complete separation. When you're talking about a JDU or junior ADU, that can, as long as it has access to a bathroom, as long as there is a kitchenette uh, within the confines of the area that the junior ADU is in, then that's considered a junior ADU. Whereas the ADU is just sort of a complete envelope with the kitchenette and the bathroom all included. The JDU has access into the residence itself. So we have clients that are actually create a master bedroom suite that we get permitted for as a JDU. So there's some blurring of lines, where there can be multi-purpose. It can be used as multi-purpose, but it can actually get you a permit faster for a master bedroom suite if you call it a JDU.
Oh, interesting. So, well, you kind of mentioned this, but it sounds like a ADU doesn't have to be a standalone structure. It can be attached to the primary residence.
Correct. It can be attached to the primary residence. You do have to create a firewall in between them, and there can be no direct connection. So the access into the ADU has to have a complete separate opening.
Okay. Well, I guess we should well, I kind of skipped over we're using ADU like everybody knows what that stands for. I think we all have a mental picture, but I believe it's an accessory dwelling unit. Is that the correct?
Yes, and what's interesting is an accessory dwelling unit could be a pool house, it could be a storage area. When it's an accessory dwelling unit that's living split space, that's where you get the separate requirements and separate, more leniency that the city can provide in certain situations.
Is there a ratio to the primary residence and square footage wise before it becomes a duplex? Have you thought about, is that?
Yes, yes. What makes it fun is that every jurisdiction has different requirements, and
Mm.
those requirements can be flexible depending on your lot size.
Mm,
So by right, everyone can do an 800 square foot ADU. However, like in example in Concord, they have a rule that it can't be more than 50% of the house size. So there's some flexible rules depending on what jurisdiction you're looking at. The other thing that people consider is once it's over 750 square feet, you pay school fees,
mm.
which may or may not affect your choice. In some locations, you have to have a larger lot in order to go over the 800 square feet, or you're subject to more restrictions and the variance process if you go over 800.
Well, that just prompts a whole bunch of questions, which it sounds like there'll be a variety of answers depending on jurisdiction. So we started out by just mentioning the states made it easier, but that doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want in any city that
Not
what you want to do it. So, um, what do you find are the biggest limiters? Obviously, there has to be a physically within a lot that there's space for it, but are there standard variances that get allowed as far as setbacks, or is it subject to all the building requirements other than just being permitted to do it?
You do get a lot of leniency with the setbacks. We find the biggest impediment for people to move forward to build an ADU is basically utilities. So where your utilities are located in proximity to where you want to put the ADU, how much space you have there. The utilities end up being the sort of the breaking point with whether or not you can build or not. Now, like if you are building an ADU, your minimum setback has to be 4 feet. However, then the ADU, if it's 4 feet within the property line, you have to have firewalls. And if you have the roof overhanging closer to 4 feet, then the roof eaves have to be fire rated. So it just bumps up your cost a little bit. So it
Yeah,
depends on how cost sensitive our clients are. But we usually recommend that you have both the eave and the ADU 5 feet away, so you don't have to do the fire rating requirements. And once you're 5 feet or even 5.5 feet away, the requirement for triggering the need for a survey on your property goes down. So if you're right up against that 4 foot setback, you most likely will have to get a partial survey to make sure that you're not going over that setback line. Now, some cities are more rigorous about this than others. We usually advise our clients to be a little bit looser so they don't trigger that setback, or if they want to maximize the space, then we go ahead and do a partial survey.
interesting. All right. Well, I think that, well, for those of you listening, we've done a podcast talking about surveys before. And the main thing we're going to tell you is your fence is probably close to your property line, but do not count on it being
That's for
being
sure.
being the boundary, the legal boundary, because it could have been by anybody built whenever it was built. And people tend to put the fence exactly where it was before. So if it was wrong the first time, it's wrong the second and third time. So
Yes.
That's for sure.
uh Siri, do you have any questions here? I just kind of been rattling them off because I'm
No,
just
no, you're doing
fascinated.
great. I was just thinking about holding Hillside open and having every single person who walks in the door wants to know where the lot line is. And I want to say the land is unusable. It's vertical. It doesn't matter where it is. But anyway, just a little aside.
Yeah. The that particular property is a house that Sherry and I have on the market, and it is on in Martinez, and it is off the hillside. Um,
Yes.
the So coming back to the ADUs, so first of all, I noticed as I was doing research on your website, you were talking about SIP, and I was like, that I can't figure out what that is, and so I finally figured out structural insulated paneling, and my dad actually used those similar product as a roofing element on a cabin he built in Tahoe Donner in the 70s.
Yes.
And so I'm going to use that as an introduction to talk about maybe some different construction techniques for ADUs. We've seen completely refab ADUs that get craned in. We've seen stick built, which means just built with the raw materials. And then it sounds like you also do work with component. I don't know how to describe it, but other than SIP, but it sounds like you bring in building systems rather than
Correct.
just stick built. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the different options for people as they think about how they might want to add an ADU and what that means around foundation and timing and cost.
No, it's a great question. I think one of the things that we've heard from folks or neighbors that they're worried about is that doing construction here in California takes a while. And so we've heard everything from, 8 months to a year to take to do your construction. We are working with Premier SIPs. They're the lead manufacturer of SIPs in the United States. It's constructed in the United States as a different building material. It's incredibly energy efficient, and the other thing that we love about it is the construction is super fast. We've gotten it in for clients where they have like a 4-foot opening in their fence, and we've got all the building materials in a day, and their project went up in a week and a half. The client right now, what we're running on is the client can get occupancy within 3.5 to 4.5 months,
Wow.
which is really wonderful when they're spending this money and this time, that they can get their structure up and be living in it in a very short amount of time. I love SIPs. It's we're now one of the few engineers that do SIPs construction drawings in the Western United States, and we're doing construction all over the United States for SIPs. We see it's either basically high-end construction because people are more aware of it and more aware of the energy efficiency, but it's been phenomenal in the ADU market because it's very competitive with stick frame construction, but the energy component is huge. So we love it for that reason. I just think doing stick framing is it's just very old school compared to the new processes that are out there for construction. And you think about how how cars have changed
Right.
from originally construction to nowadays, and to not look at new construction practices. Anyway, it's exciting to me and I'm passionate about it. I just think it's really the new wave of how to do construction, especially when we're trying to protect our energy grid. It's really the right thing to do, and keep your PG&E prices low.
Yeah.
So now they just passed a new energy requirements law. The code gets upgraded every couple years. And in January, it just got upgraded where if you're doing construction in California, you need to now have a insulation on the outside of your walls to comply with the new energy requirements. And so it really makes the tipping point in using SIPs more cost effective, because when you use SIPs, you don't have to get that new layer of insulation during construction. But we do all types of designs. If somebody wants conventional framing, we will certainly do that for them.
So on, I got so many questions now about the new energy regulation. I mean,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
so they're having to do. So are they doing like a styrofoam rigid insulation on the
Rigid
outside of the framing? Not
insulation on the
styrofoam, but yeah, yeah.
outside of the construction. A lot of
And
our contractors don't even know how to do that.
and so then how is siding being fastened? They've got to go through that rigid insulation to get to the structure, to whether it's a hardy plank, or if they're doing stucco, I imagine they could paper and stucco over that. Like what is that? How are we securing the weight
You,
of the siding to the structure through the
as
insulation?
long as that insulation is connected to a plywood substructure, then basically you can do the same stucco, the same siding. You just need more fasteners. So it's 50% more fasteners to be able to connect it, but we can use the same materials that we've always used.
Fascinating.
It's just another layer of construction.
Glenn, I'm gonna have to buy you coffee after we're done here because I got so many questions to go through. So I didn't mention this, Glenn, but my undergrad degree is in construction management. So
Oh,
I like dabbled in all of this 40 years ago. Um, and in theory, I bring some of that knowledge to our residential buyers and sellers. But I can't. Now you got me geeking out on the details that I don't think most of our clients care about. Um, but so going back to the ADU, So foundations, so if we're thinking about site prep, location, we talked a little bit about setbacks. What are other site considerations beyond just having the space to do it?
I think again, the biggest one is the utilities. People don't realize how much it affects them when they go to do their ADU. And we recommend to our clients that we look at utilities first before we do it. The floor plan is fun, but if
Yep.
you don't look at the utilities in where you want to situate it, you might be spending a lot of money. So the where the utilities are located, like I'll give you an example. For PG&E is the worst. Okay. So we always tell our clients that if you are thinking of doing an ADU, let's check your electrical panel. If you have not upgraded your electrical panel, then you go to PG&E and you tell them that something's freaked you out, your panel's really old, you smelled smoke, or somebody was alarmed about your panel, and you ask for an emergency upgrade on your panel. When you ask for that, that means any licensed contractor who has an electrical license can upgrade your panel, and then PG&E inspects it. If you try to upgrade your panel as part of your ADU permit process, you are usually going to be waiting another 6 to 8 months for PG&E to upgrade your panel for you. So it is cheaper and faster for our clients to do the emergency upgrade, get another contractor to do it that knows what they're doing, they're licensed, and then just have PG&E inspect it.
Do they bring in new drops, or is it the conductors that they have coming to your weatherhead? Are they
You
typically
need,
sufficient for a bigger panel?
usually it's sufficient. Usually it's sufficient. You need to upgrade your panel to at least 200 amps so that you can have a 100 amp feeder to the ADU. So that's the minimum requirement.
How often are you burying that 100 amp lead to the sub versus doing a drop, not a drop, but wires overhead?
Everyone that I know that's doing I'll say one exception, that the exception is they're building the house and the ADU at the same time, so they're doing an additional drop.
Yeah.
But they're just feeding off the main residence and pulling in the 200 amps from their existing service.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I meant between the house and the ADU. Are they burying the
Oh,
conductors to the
yes,
ADU? Yeah.
yes,
Because
that is
that would seem
correct.
like a hazard to have
No,
overhead
it's
in the
underground.
backyard. Yeah. It would seem that the that's interesting because my perception would have been when we're talking utilities that the waistline would be the most critical thing because of being dependent on gravity and that everything else would have some design flexibilities. Do you find that, I mean, most waistlines are buried deep enough in the street that you get the gravity flow, but do you find that you have to add pumping any often or?
Sure, absolutely. That's probably the second most critical, is to determine where the waistline is located, so that see that if you can feed off, because again, it can become cost prohibitive if you're looking at the pump system. And unfortunately, in some jurisdictions, they make you do a direct line to the street from the ADU. There are some jurisdictions, Berkeley will make you do a brand new line from the ADU to the street. So
Yeah,
you
well,
can't feed off the line from the house.
I feel like Berkeley's also trying to, Berkeley has the problem where they have a lot of their houses where they join the sewer line together between properties already. So I imagine Berkeley's trying to separate as many
I'm sure.
residents as possible. And they have, in parts of Berkeley, they have redwood as their sewer lines, even in the street, like from, over 100 years ago. So they got lots of upgrading available to them. Um, and for those listening, the other thing at play in the Bay Area, particularly Oakland, Berkeley, facing the East Bay, facing the Bay, is there's a lot of concern about sewer leakage getting into the groundwater, affecting groundwater in the Bay water. So most of the cities bordering the Bay require a sewer lateral every time a house is sold. So it just makes sense that they would be a little bit more stringent on that. Kind of going back, I know we said we weren't exactly going to touch on this, but we'll touch on it enough that keeping in mind that California has tried to make it easier for ADUs to be sold separately from the primary residence, do you see any jurisdictions asking for separate metering? Or is it pretty much whatever you want to do? If you wanted to pay the extra cost for a second meter, seems
Correct.
laborious, but is it,
Correct. That's
yeah,
what we see. But I will say, as much as the state has promoted the ADU, we actually have a form letter based on the law, the AB 2533 law. And we've had to use it multiple occasions with Contra Costa County, City of Concord, City of Walnut Creek, basically saying, hey guys, we're past our 60 days. We need to get a permit. And we've had to use that over and over again because the cities they drag their feet any which way they can, and they're trying to comply. I mean, we see that they're trying to, but it's happened many occasions where we're at the 6 month mark trying to get a permit.
Hmm.
wow. So, so we've talked a little bit about construction here in the Bay Area, but I know you have your license in multiple states, and you said you're doing designing. Do you do building outside of the Bay Area, or do you focus the building locally and then design wherever you can get clients?
We've partnered with a number of contractors, and we basically do building just in the Bay Area.
Okay. And without there being any extraordinary expenses in discovery, is there an approximate price range for using the SIP system to build, say, a 800 square foot ADU without, flat lot, simple, no major complications? What kind of budget should buyer or homeowners have?
I think any homeowners actually, whether you're doing conventional framing or SIPs construction, you're going to be somewhere in the order of $400 to $600 a square foot.
Okay.
And that sway, I mean, you maybe go down to 300, 350, but that sway is really going to depend on two things: your utilities and your finishes.
Okay. Yeah, finishes always. Yeah. The
For
difference
sure.
between custom built cabinets and IKEA cabinets and Home Depot cabinets.
A
Do
huge
you,
swing.
yeah. Do you, and so if somebody wanted to, so we're going to have all of your contact info in the show notes. Um, you're doing the ADU business out of Comfort Casitas, is that right?
Correct.
So,
Yes.
so there's a website for Comfort Casitas in addition to her engineering website. You have an engineering website? You have an engineering email. I assume there's a
We
website.
do. We do. Bertolami Engineering is our engineering website. And we've done everything from new construction to I want to put a new awning in the front of our house to I'm doing a kitchen remodel and want to take down a wall. We do some foundation repair, but we kind of trying to back away from that more. I've been crawling under houses for a number of years now. I like to do it less frequently. But yeah, we do just about the whole gambit and have started to doing more residential engineering design outside of California and commercial as well.
Interesting. So it sounds like if our audience is listening and you're interested in any sort of residential additions or structural changes to a house, you would do all that work, or you at least entertain it. I say all that work. Who knows what uh, what we're opening up? We always love it when a client says, "Can I move a wall?" Because the answer is always yes, at a cost. And I
Correct.
think that it's interesting the solutions that we've come up with for a lot of different things. When you see, I haven't, I mean, the thing is, we don't see these members after they've been done, but do you do things where you're raising the structural beam up into the attic space, so kind of
Oh, all the
hiding the
time.
beam? Yeah,
Yeah.
and what does that process look like? I mean, is you're having to beef up maybe point loads at each end where you're going underneath the house and do new footings? How extensive is a project like that?
It really depends on the span on the beam, but I wanted to actually touch on something you mentioned because I think it helps people understand when they're doing construction here in California, especially the Bay Area. We look at things from two perspectives. when you're taking down a wall or putting in a new beam and pushing that beam up, there's gravity. Make sure the roof doesn't fall down. I mean, everyone understands that. But because we're in California, if you're taking down the wall, we as a licensed civil engineer have to upgrade the building where that construction is taking place, not to the code of when it was built, but to the new California building code. So the seismic piece is the one that people don't always understand. That definitely is the more cost conscious of the two, or can be very expensive. So, but if you're trying to just push up a beam, so let's go back to what you're saying. The contractor needs to support the ceiling or the roof, whichever is being supported by the beam, with some temporary shoring. And then they can remove the existing beam, cut into whatever they're supporting, and we just clip it to the new beam. So a lot of times it has more of an effect. Like, we need to be careful you don't have trusses, because then that gets tricky. You can't just cut trusses. And also how much height you have available at the endpoints. So
Oh, right. Because
what's happening with your roof, you may not have as much meat for that beam to sit on. So these are things that we definitely take in consideration when we're pushing up a beam. But there's a lot of new products out that are like engineered beams that are not, and they're very cost effective, not just standard lumber, that are a lot stronger than just your conventional lumber. So there are a lot of ways to go about doing that. And a lot of contractors, I mean, I would say every contractor would know exactly how to push up a beam.
we had a pretty severe repair on an Eichler a couple years ago, and it's kind of the exception to the glue lam or engineered beam or what other things there, because it was exposed. We couldn't just give an alternative, so they had to buy. It was the beams that went over the garage and then stuck out another 4 feet, and they rotted right at the bearing point on the garage door. So there was no recovery from that. And they had to go, they bought the biggest beam that they could find. Well, they had to get two of them at Ashby Lumber. And they said if it had been 1 foot longer, they would have had to go to the mill and mill that beam. And it was just like, any place else, you could have hidden all of that. But because everybody could see it, you couldn't use that. Um, Going back to what you were saying, both about the kind of updating that for the code, you're I don't know if you mean the shear paneling for lateral strength, or whether you meant something more than that.
No, that's exactly what I meant. Yeah.
So I don't know the best way to explain this verbally over it when someone's just listening, but if you can picture a triangle doesn't change shape, right? You put a load on the top, you can't push the ends out if they're all fixed. But if you've got a square, like a square wall or rectangle wall, it can become a parallelogram if there's lateral force on it. So the shear panel is designed to be a rigid square or rectangle that helps keep that house from becoming a parallelogram. And there's other ways that the engineer, and here I'm telling the engineer, this is for the audience, not for you, Gwen, but how to make that square not become a parallelogram, whether it's with sheathing or some other fastener or strapping that makes it stable. So that's what she was alluding to, not just pushing it up, but if you've got an interior wall that's giving the house lateral strength, you got to figure out how to pick that load up differently.
Yeah, usually I would describe it if you think about your wall, it's a bunch of studs. So a bunch of just pieces of wood that are lined up in the same pattern. When we add plywood to those studs and we nail it off with a specific nailing pattern, all of a sudden that wall gets a lot stronger because it's connected by the sheet of plywood. And then we anchor it to the foundation on the ends, which allows, they're called hold downs. They hold down that parallelogram and keep it connected to the foundation in the event of an earthquake.
All right, Sherry, I was geeking out on the construction stuff. Any thoughts or questions?
This is all over my head. I sell houses for a living. I don't build them or remodel them, and only touch briefly on it with clients, mostly to say you need to call somebody. But I'm so impressed with both of you and how much you know. I'm kind of geeking out on, along with you, so enjoying it.
Gwen, any final comments you want to make sure that we and our audience are aware of, whether it's specifically about ADUs or your broader business, that would be helpful?
I think if anybody's considering an ADU, a lot of times you can look at the aerial view of your house just by Google Maps, and you can kind of see any areas that might be large enough to put an ADU on. We will actually do like a just a site analysis where we'll put an like 800 square feet box in on somebody's property so that they can see how large it is and then how close it is to their pool or their house. These are all things you definitely want to consider, but utilities, I would say, still are the biggest item for folks, and just understanding like where's your sewer line?
Hmm.
Where's your electrical panel? Where's your water connection? And that really feeds into how much your ADU is going to cost.
All right, Gwen,
Good to know.
thank you so much. You've been really educational and helpful for us, and hopefully our audience will be a little bit better educated about ADUs. Without any other comments or thoughts, this has been The Real Story with Adam and Sherry. If you found this interesting, be sure to like and subscribe and recommend this to your friends and family. Dorothy was right. There's no place like home. See you next time.